As geopolitical competition intensifies, countries across the Asia Pacific are navigating how to minimize being caught in the middle. For ASEAN, principles of consensus and non-interference are increasingly tested amid shifting power dynamics. Astro AWANI correspondent Faye Kwan brings us more from the 38th Asia Pacific Roundtable.
I'm here at the 38th Asia Pacific Roundtable in Kuala Lumpur, where this year's theme is Recalibrating Asia's Frontiers. Now, this is what makes it a space really for exchange and reflection into the forces shaping our region. Joining me today here at the Asia Pacific Roundtable is Prof. Dr. Muhammad Faiz Abdullah, the 2025 chair of the ASEAN ISIS Network, as well as chairman of ISIS Malaysia. Prof, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Pleasure having you on. Now, firstly, when we speak about within the ASEAN context, consensus and non-interference is really the key principles to the bloc. But these principles themselves are also sometimes seen as the roadblocks when responding to crisis. So now, in line with this year's APR's theme of recalibrating Asia's frontiers, what do you think? How can mechanisms like Track 2 diplomacy and the APR itself help ASEAN respond more effectively without compromising those values?
Yep, well, it's a very great question. The thing that we got to figure out, first of all, when we talk about Track 2 diplomacy, this is where the ASEAN, as well as the Asia Pacific Roundtable comes into the picture, is that first we provide the alternative pathways in terms of giving the avenue for the articulation of views which may not be seen to be suitable or appropriate at the formal level. What I mean by that is that in order to foster creative innovation in thinking, new ideas, policy branding, this is where the Track 2 diplomacy, in this case the Asia Pacific Roundtable, gives the forum for practitioners and experts to be able to voice out of the box and away from the confines of a formal ASEAN discourse. So that's quite crucial. Secondly, you're looking at the issue about in relation particularly to getting out of the constraints of views which may be tied, say, to the government. So each representative or player within the think tanks that comprise and come forward to participate in the Asia Pacific Roundtable are entitled to express their own views. Even in the case of ISIS Malaysia, even though formally we report to the government in the sense of the structure, we are autonomous in being able to express and articulate our own position vis-a-vis what we see would be the best thing that could happen for ASEAN. That is the point that I would like to make across. And finally, also you have to bear in mind that within ASEAN itself, there are structural limitations, both in terms of size and both in terms of the way things go about. Here, APR, Track 2 diplomacy, discourses allow for a more vibrant discourse without having to worry about what the official position is. I think that's up to that.
And not having to worry about walking that tightrope between global powers. But when we look at Asia Pacific, the region itself is a large, very strategically located and economically significant region. And especially in today's increasingly polarized world, what's going on with US-China tensions, how important is it then for this region to kind of lead in its own multilateral efforts and strengthen self-reliance rather than depending on those major powers?
Well, we have to accept when we talk about this region, if you're referring to the Asia Pacific, the major powers themselves are a constituent part of this. So it could be a bit misleading to say how we could break away from there. Having said that, though, within this particular entity, you have huge areas in terms of economic entities. You have the RCEP, you have the CPTPP, and you have the various formations across. What happens is that the smaller countries, apart from the major power, are able to articulate themselves in the way as represented by, in this classic case, ASEAN member states themselves, to show that there are specific areas which are germane to ASEAN member states where they can articulate with cohesion and with centrality. So this itself is a counterpoint against the so-called prevailing powers or the problems in terms of rivalry and conflict between the, well, we don't have to name the elephants in the room that will be causing certain level of uneasiness if it's separated from the discourse. I give you a classic example in relation to the South China Sea issue. Are we going to be prescribed by the limitations and, of course, the constraints between these two great powers when ASEAN articulates a specific position? No. This is where the ability to be cohesive and the need to conform to ASEAN centrality is key to advancing a cohesive view, and also particularly to articulate both in action and in speech.
All right, thank you so much for sharing your insights and taking the time to speak to me, Datuk Prof. Faiz. That's all I have for today. Stay tuned for more coverage on Astro AWANI on the 38th Asia Pacific Roundtable. Back to you in the studio.